Shabbat Shalom, and almost Happy New Year. We'll enjoy the last few minutes, few hours we have together of 2022. At this time of year, with the calendar about to begin anew, we see all types of lists that look back at the year that's passed. And if you look at the lists featuring Jewish news or Jewish events from the past year, it will come as no surprise that 2022 was dominated by stories of anti-Semitism and hate. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about Kanye today. Despite, or sometimes because of that, there was also a lot of good that happened in the past year in the Jewish world. Stories of heroism, bravery, groundbreaking firsts and landmark anniversaries also added to this Jewish year. They were not only stories that frightened us or made us feel tense and frustrated, but also stories that made us proud and highlighted the values we hold dear. A moment in our Parsha speaks to this. After Joseph has his dramatic reconciliation with his brothers, he prepares to introduce them to Pharaoh. And something strange happens. Joseph instructs his brothers not to reveal to Pharaoh that they are shepherds because, as he says, Egyptians hate shepherds. Instead, tell Pharaoh that you're breeders of livestock. And lo and behold, when the brothers meet Pharaoh, can anyone guess what they tell him? They tell him, not only are we shepherds, but our fathers were shepherds. We come from a long line of shepherds too. Instead of hiding who they are, the brothers blatantly disregard Joseph's instructions and say exactly what they are. There can be times when we choose not to publicize who we are. The comfort we may feel can quickly transition into uneasiness and fear. Yet, like Joseph's brothers, there are also times we want to announce to the world exactly who we are. We are proud of our heritage, our history, our rituals, and our peoplehood. Looking back on the year that's passed feels like such a perfect encapsulation of that. Too often we feel like we have to hide our identities, but that is not the full story. More often than not, we want all the world to know what the Jewish people stand for, even if some of those moments have come as a response to bad. While this year, of course, had its ups and downs like any year, let us focus on the moments that were groundbreaking, game-changing, momentous, and inspiring. And so with that, here is a list of some, but of course not all, of the positive and game-changing Jewish stories that define the year 2022. Without a doubt, the story this year will be remembered for is bravery and resilience. Without a doubt, the story this year we'll remember is the bravery and resilience of Ukraine. In April of 2019, the Jewish comedian Vladimir Zelensky was elected as the Ukrainian prime minister. And while it was an exciting moment for the Jewish community, it felt like something of a novelty to those watching from abroad, that feels like a really long time ago, a distant reality. In some ways, it feels hard to believe that the fighting in Ukraine only just began in February of this year. It feels like it's been going on for a much longer time. The offensive that Russia envisioned would only last days to weeks is of course now going on to its 11th month with no end in sight. We'll undoubtedly be hearing these stories too in 2023. The overcoming of the seemingly impossible odds is thanks in large part to the leadership, bravery, and heroism of Prime Minister Zelensky, who I'm sure I don't need to tell you was not just the Jewish person of this past year, but Time Magazine's pick for Person of the Year as well. When President Biden welcomed Zelensky to the White House just a few short weeks ago, he evoked Hanukkah in his remarks to him, saying in part, "Tonight is the fourth night of Hanukkah, a time when Jewish people around the world, President Zelensky and many Ukrainian families among them, honor the timeless miracle of a small band of warriors fighting for their values and their freedom against a much larger foe, and how they endured and how they overcame. A story of survival and resilience that reminds us that the coldest days of the year, that light will always prevail over darkness, and hope drives away despair, and that the human spirit is unconquerable as long as there are good people willing to do what is right." That is a message we can hold on to for this year, a story of modern-day heroes and acts of resilience against violence and hate. Which of course brings us to the other, perhaps defining Jewish story of this past year, On a cold Shabbat morning in January, a man came to synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. The rabbi of the congregation, Charlie Citron Walker, welcomed the stranger as any good person would do, yet soon found that this individual entered the synagogue that morning with the worst of intentions, and a hostage crisis that shook the Jewish world ensued. Rabbi Citron Walker and the few congregants who were there that morning all thankfully survived the unimaginable ordeal, but the attack opened up a conversation about our safety and security as American Jews once again. It was a moment that could collectively frighten American Jews away from going to synagogue at all. But in large swaths of the country, the opposite happened. It instead became a moment that emboldened us to show up more proudly and resolutely than ever. In response to the hostage situation, historian, academic, and author Deborah Lipstadt, who in March was named Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism abroad, another big moment in this year of 2022, wrote a New York Times op-ed entitled, "For Jews, Going to Services is an Act of Courage." In the article, she talked about the senselessness of the fact that even going to synagogue is something that causes many American Jews to worry for their safety. She wrote, "We are shaken, we are not okay, but we will bounce back. We are resilient because we cannot afford not to be. That resiliency is part of the Jewish DNA. Without it, we would have disappeared centuries ago. We refuse to go away." The situation in Colleyville also brought to mind a much more tragic hostage situation, the 50th anniversary of which was commemorated in September, the horrific attack at the Munich Olympics that left 11 Israeli athletes and 1 German police officer dead. For those 50 years, Israel, Jews around the world, and most importantly, the families of those killed in the attack, have been waiting for proper recognition. In September, the airfield that was the site of the botched rescue mission became the venue for a German apology 50 years in the making. The president of Germany asked for forgiveness on behalf of the country, which has failed for decades to take responsibility for their own failures and has historically refused access to relevant files related to the attack. The apology was not only symbolic, as a large sum of money went towards the families of the victims, and an Israeli-German historical commission was established to produce an accurate account of the events, including German failures. The daughter of one weightlifter tragically killed in the attack said, "We waited years for this big day. It's a kind of closure for us after 50 years. Finally, everything is being worked through." In a much happier 50-year anniversary, it was also in 1972 that the first female rabbi was first ordained in the United States. In June of that year, Sally Priesand, along with her 35 male peers, was afforded the title of rabbi by the Reform movement. Just to give a small taste of how different the world looked at the time of her ordination, the New York Times article detailing Rabbi Priesand's historic ordination noted that her fellow seminary students at first assumed she enrolled in the program merely intending to find a husband, but that they eventually came to respect her sincerity. Rabbi Sally Priesand stood on the shoulders of those who came before her. As this past February, synagogues around the world celebrated the 100th anniversary of the first bat mitzvah in America, a milestone that helped pave the way for the role of women in Jewish religious leadership. On March 18th, 1922, Judith Kaplan, daughter of the famous Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, read from the Chumash on the bima in an historic moment. Although she did not read from the Torah itself, and her bat mitzvah looked very different than ours do today, her bat mitzvah service was a watershed moment that led to new opportunities for girls and women in all walks of Jewish life. In a very different moment for groundbreaking Jewish women, this past year, basketball star Sue Bird of the Seattle Storm ended her 19-year playing career. No relation to Larry Bird, Sue Bird's paternal ancestors changed their last name when they arrived at Ellis Island from Russia. Sue Bird was raised in a mixed religion household in Syosset, Long Island, with a Jewish father and Catholic mother. In 2006, Bird acquired Israeli citizenship using right of return laws, which opened her up to compete in European women's basketball leagues. Without a doubt, one of the greatest women's basketball players of all time, Jewish or otherwise, she finished her career with multiple individual records in the sport, as well as 4 WNBA championships and 5 Olympic gold medals. And as one Jewish basketball career came to a close, another one is just getting started. This past season, one of the most impressive players in all of college basketball came from an unlikely school, Yeshiva University. This week, Ryan Terrell, formerly of Yeshiva University, made his debut in the NBA G League, the minor league system for the NBA, for the team affiliated with the Detroit Pistons, the Motor City Cruise. Terrell, wearing the kippah that has become a part of his signature look and his uniform, scored 21 points. He is maintaining his dream of becoming the first observant Jew to play in the NBA, and of course, the whole Jewish world is rooting for him. I think he could probably help the Knicks at this point. And lastly, a story that is near and dear to my heart because of my love of comic books and graphic novels. In late January of this past year, the school board of McMinn County, Tennessee voted by a count of 10-0 to remove the graphic novel Mouse from the middle school curriculum. The work, first released in 1991, serves as a memoir chronicling the author Art Spiegelman's real-life conversations with his father about his horrific experience of the Holocaust, the resilience he tapped into in order to survive, and how it impacted his own life and his family to come. What makes the graphic novel Mouse unique is the way it depicts different religions and nationalities. The Poles are pigs, the French are frogs, and playing on the most hate-filled anti-Semitic propaganda, the Jews are portrayed as helpless mice stuck under the foot of the terrifyingly powerful Nazi cats. It all sounds very crude, but if you read it, you'll see it's an incredible work of literature that I very highly recommend. The ban in Tennessee was allegedly because the school board was concerned about some of the imagery in the graphic novel. But it remained another example of the Jewish narrative and painful past being silenced and written off. In the wake of the 10-0 vote from the school board, Mouse took on a new life, and an outpouring of support came in. It became an Amazon bestseller almost immediately, even though it first was released in 1991, and for a time it was completely sold out nationwide. In California, some 2,400 miles away from where the McMinn County vote took place, one comic book store owner tweeted on January 26, just a day before Holocaust Remembrance Day, that he would donate 100 copies of the book to families in the county where it was banned. And in Knoxville, just north of McMinn County, another comic book store announced it would loan copies of Mouse to local students. A GoFundMe page with a stated goal of raising $20,000 to purchase new copies of Mouse ended up getting instead $110,000. Truly an inspiring moment for those who are seeking to access that story. There are, of course, many more stories that define this year, but this was just a snapshot. These stories and key moments of 2022 not only inspire us as Jews, but of course as human beings. Some are tales of bravery, resilience, strength, and talent that showcase the best of who we are, even in the darkest and hardest moments. Other stories focus on our progress in the world and the support and aid of others. While 2023 is a fresh start, we can only assume it will come with hardships and challenges like every year, but may it also be filled with goodness, with health, with acts of righteousness and humanity. May good always overcome evil, and may light always shine in our darkest moments. Wishing you all a sweet, happy, healthy New Year, filled with moments that make us proud of who we are as a Jewish people. Wishing you a happy New Year and a Shabbat Shalom.